hear me?
Yes, sir. We're live.
Being on a podcast or on a call like this puts you back in your element, like back in your old days in the radio, right? Does it feel nostalgic for you?
Well, a little bit. I for years I did a little syndicated segment called Rich Ideas, and my block was only like 3 minutes, 3 minutes long. But I had to basically kind of read because when you only got 120 seconds, you pretty much got to make sure every word counts. But
Listen, you ain't gonna get that here. Okay,
no,
I got my
no.
dogs in the background. There's probably throw up, spit up. There's probably turds somewhere on the floor as we're potty training our 2.5-year-old. I'm gonna probably Google things and read things. I'm gonna use Chat GPT. I mean, we're gonna just figure it out as we go, and that's the nature of how us riches do things.
So
So
it's not just contagious talk, it's completely spontaneous contagious talk.
that's it, right?
I
Well,
love it.
hopefully after the previous talk that we had, we hopefully laid some of the framework around contagious. Hopefully you have a general idea or understanding around being contagious in your everyday interactions with others. And again, even not even the interactions, some of the things that you don't do can be contagious. And boiling that and making the correlation to the word influence, which we'll talk more about. Um, so again, I think we talked a little bit more about the definition of influence. Again, just to kind of reinstate, my understanding is that it is something that you do that shapes the way someone acts, thinks, the way they feel. I mean, you name it. Um, but yeah, I think influence is an interesting word because again, it's something that has always been around since the absolute beginning of time.
Yeah,
People at some
absolutely.
point had to lean on where do I go? What do I do? Who should I trust? I would imagine it doesn't matter when and where. That's influence has been influence.
Yeah. And regardless of walk of life or whatever, you someone might do or not do, influence is a relevant topic. And I did just for sake of curiosity, looking up the definition, the dictionary definition of influence. And it
Webster's.
is a noun, of course, a power affecting a person, thing, or course of events, especially one that operates without any direct or apparent effort. And I thought there was a couple things in that was really kind of worth kind of discussing. Number one is it's defined as a power. Isn't that kind of interesting?
It
It's
is interesting.
defined as a power.
Mr.
Um,
Influence with a cape and everything.
I just thought it could have they could have used the word skill or trait, right? But they used the dictionary used the word power, affecting a person. And then of course the second part that caught my attention was especially one that operates without any direct or apparent effort. So they're saying that this power to influence um, is something that should happen quite naturally. Whether it's learned or innate, it still should happen authentically, spontaneously, naturally, right? And I just thought that was very an interesting definition. I've never thought of influence as a power before.
Yeah, I naturally when you hear the word influence, especially in 2026, where influencer is literally a job title. I mean, that is how people make a living now is being an influencer. Um, you naturally think about some of the biggest people in positions of power. You think of the president, you think of the CEO of a company, um, and our previous conversation, I hope that we helped again lay the framework to help you understand that it doesn't matter who you are, what you do. you have influence. Every little action. I believe that you have a better chance of being influential when you spend more time recognizing where influence exists. Like, who influences me? Who influenced me to do this week or act this way? Um, but yeah, it's not necessarily something. I mean, we talked about that. Like, it's things that you can do to be more influential, but it's also everything that you do in between that, everything that you say, the way that you act, your attitude. Um,
Yeah, no
that's
doubt
kind of
about it.
unintentional influence, and that's where it has the most impact. Intentional influence can be a mentorship, a coaching session, giving feedback. Unintentional, which per what you're saying is the part that has the most impact, is around the way you act and the way your attitude is and the way that you know,
Carry yourself, the way
right.
that you interact. Yeah, that's the power. And wouldn't it be cool if we became a resource for influencers? Now we got right. We're helping influencers learn more about influence,
Yeah.
and quite frankly, the responsibility that comes with influence. I mean, gosh, that's a whole nother topic and a whole nother podcast, but the responsibility that comes with that power to influence is immense, absolutely immense.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because as someone with young kids, and I mentioned this before, I am recognizing the word influence and being influential more than ever having a young kid because, I can literally say the word shit, and 2 weeks later, my son's running around the house going shit, shit, shit. And I'm like, okay, I influenced my son in some form or fashion, and I had no idea. I didn't even know he was watching me. I didn't even know he was in the other room. So
Right.
now I'm recognizing the word influence more than ever, but vice versa. It's like the things that he does and says that has influence on me, a 2-year-old. It's amazing that influence literally boils down to a 2-year-old that doesn't even have a fully developed functional brain yet.
No doubt.
Recognize
We
it or not.
we have we have influence on everybody that we interact with 100% of the time, whether we realize it or don't realize it. But going back to the 2-year old, one of the main elements to being influential, um, I often said, if you really want to study how to be a more contagious person, okay, spend the day with a toddler. Spend the day with a 4-year old or a 5-year old or 6-year old. Um, and the reason is because I think one of the main elements to influence is curiosity, you know, and asking questions and learning about the world and the other person. And children are just naturally curious. How does this work? Why does that work? Tell me about that. Explain more about that to me, Daddy. And I think that we can be more influential with another person just by being more curious about them. One of the most one of the most powerful, and we go back to that word again, power, right? One of the most powerful words or things that we can do when we meet somebody is to say, tell me about yourself. Ask questions about them. Get them talking about themselves. Be curious about their background. Be curious about their journey. Um, that, believe it or not, that curiosity is that children naturally have is incredibly influential.
Yeah, I've been trying to research a lot of different ways to, like, I saw a post or something that was like, if you want to see that, like, just go outside and ask, your kid or a kid, like, look at the clouds. What do you see? What do you think clouds are made of? And their response is just whether it's right or wrong, it doesn't even matter. Just seeing the way that they are so curious is such an interesting thing. And even if his answer is completely wrong, the amount of influence that it has on me to just think differently and have an
Yeah.
alternative perspective, it's
Yeah. Have that sense of wonder. But if in every interaction that we had from this point forward, if we just thought to ourselves, I want to learn more about that person than that person learns about me, you will be more influential.
right.
If your focus is on the other person rather than on your agenda, you will naturally be more influential.
Right. So going into the world of where we know when I think about the word influence, you know, and whether it's with a person or, my child or a friend, doesn't matter what it is, I have to sit there and think like I have to really figure out what do I say to them and how do I say it in a way that gets through to them. Um, and it's the way that I approach them, it's the tone in my voice that ends up having more power of influence on them. And there's a thing that you've introduced me to, which I think we could spend a little bit of time talking about. I think it's the most brilliant thing in the world of and I'll have to look it up because I don't remember what it's called, but that 7, 30, 50% idea around communication and the things that have influence on another person. So there was a professor in the 60s, and his name was Albert Morabian. He was a professor of psychology, I think, in California, but he came
UCLA.
UCLA. Okay, that's it. And it was basically this method around, you know, verbal versus non-verbal cues or actions that have influence on other people. So again, relating it to a sales environment, the idea is around 7% of what you say has an influence on the customer. There's that much importance in what they say. 38% on how you sound has influence on what decision they make or what they decide. And 55% is how you look when you say it. And I will tell you firsthand, from a personal perspective, growing up in a household where we were extremely animated, we wore our emotions on our sleeve. We screamed. We yelled. We did not wait until nighttime. You and mom did not wait till nighttime was done to go behind a closed door to hash it out. You did it right then and there. I could never have told you what you said in those moments. I have no idea what you guys ever talked about or yelled about, but I remember how you sounded. I remembered how you looked when you said it. And it's the same thing now is when I am speaking to my wife and we're getting into a debate or an argument, it's not really what I say, but she goes, "You're raising your voice." And that's the thing that gets her. That's the thing that makes her go, "Okay, that's affecting me." And it
Right.
was
So I
how
guess
I
we should have
sounded and how I looked.
right. So I guess we should have a disclaimer on here that says this is not necessarily marriage and parenting, tips.
I
we're
mean,
we're not we're not qualified to
yeah, we're
venture into that
definitely
arena, but
unqualified.
totally unqualified. But there was an old friend of mine that said, he that was speaking. He spoke on how to be an effective parent, and he did so for years without having kids, right? Just from a philosophical, from his perch on the ivory tower. And then once he had kids, he said he changed his whole thing to, hey, here are a few things you may want to try. I have no idea whether they'll work or not. It's a complete crapshoot. But anyway, I digress. But I want to go back to that Albert Morabian study. And yes, we think it's all about the words we say. But what he said and what he found out in that very exhaustive study was that only 7% of the actual words we say influence another person. 38% is how we sound. Do we sound trustworthy? Do we sound authentic? Do we sound like we know what we're talking about? Do we sound credible? Do we sound, all those things? Do we sound, like we mean it? And then 55%, going back to your statistic, 55% he concluded was how we look. Do we look trustworthy? Do we look sincere? Do we look credible? Do we look believable? Do we look like someone they would want to believe? So, and I guess the bottom line was 93% was not verbal, but rather nonverbal on that. And then he later on, that statistic was then prorated by many different people through the years. One was Bert Decker, who was a very famous speaker and writer on the topic of communication. He prorated that Morabian study to when you're strictly on the telephone, right? You don't have that visual aspect. He concluded that that 7% became 16%, right? The words became a little bit more important, right? Because you took away the visuals. So 16% was what you said, but 84% was how you sounded. And so, it changed the way I would speak to audiences and salespeople because, sure, we could spend a lot of time on scripts and words and things to say, but if you can't say them naturally, authentically, influentially, it isn't going to mean anything. So it's going to fall flat. So I thought that I'm glad you brought that statistic into the conversation because that's a huge, powerful thing for people to wrap their hands around.
I see it firsthand all the time with leaders, and they're trying to figure out what to say. And and again, I don't want to say you could say anything, but people are responding, whether visually or emotionally, without having showing you to what you're saying based on how you sound and how you look. And that's what makes them believe than the words that you're saying.
No doubt.
I'm not, we're again, there is a percent in there. The percent's not zero. It is important. What you say is important, but there's a bigger importance. And that's the moral of the message. Because to your point, like that percentage, it's been interpreted by many different people. That percentage online, okay, this is 7, 38, 55. Some people have some different percentages there, but you get the point of the message is don't get so consumed by what do I say? Yes, plan what you're going to say, but really be hypersensitive to how you sound when you say it. And if they are in person, how you look when you say it. If that element of them not physically being there isn't there, if you're calling a coworker or a friend and you want to influence them or inspire them or whatever it may be, just understand there's an even bigger importance in how you sound and your tone in what you're saying than the actual words that you're saying that's going to impact them. And
Yeah.
it's extremely interesting. And so, again, this goes back to, as someone in the learning and development space, I love giving people, training opportunities or learning opportunities and telling them exactly what to say, which is great. Like I want to literally say, there's no confusion here. This exact response will give you the best intended results. But that now getting into the space of like how they say it or how they look when they say it, again, I am someone that falls victim to this. I'm like, that is so hard to teach. How can I teach them to say it in a way that is authentic and curious? Which again, I think I want to go into that as the next episode around curiosity. But when it comes to how you sound when you say things and how you look, how do you teach someone that? Like, you could teach them what to say. I'll put it on paper, blah, 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 blah. But how do you teach how to sound a certain way? How to look when you say it?
Well,
Show
it's
them?
Yeah, it's $1 million question, Ryan. That's why you could go into telemarketing departments through the years and you could take two people side by side, give them the same script. So they have the same words, but yet one is so much more effective and has way better results than the person right next to them. They're using the same words. And that goes back to what you're saying, is it comes down to where words are important. Okay. They play a role, but it's how you sound. If you're just saying the words, but you don't have a feeling of believing what you're saying. So going back to how do you do that? So the first thing I taught people in answer to your question was fall in love with what you're doing. Because if you fall in love with what you're doing and you fall in love with, in other words, if you come to work every day and it's just a job and you're just going to punch the clock, go, do your time, go home. I can't wait to working for the weekend, right? You're going to, you may say all the right things, right? But you're not going to be as successful as that person who comes there that day and they love what they do. They feel a sense of passion. They feel a sense of accomplishment and they want to be the best they can be at it. And it comes through in the tone of their voice. It comes through in the inflections. It comes through in their eyes. It comes through in their pauses. It comes through in their body language. And so the first step, I think, in trying to teach somebody authenticity, right? Because that's the big question. How do you teach somebody to be authentic? Right? Going back to that definition of influence, right? It's a power that happens without them even knowing it. How do you teach that? Well, I think one is just loving life and loving what you do, and feeling and falling in love with going to work every day, right?
So let's take a pause on that and let's spend just a second there because I understand what you're saying. The number one, call it a skill if you will, but the number one thing you're saying is to truly love what you do. Um, and I agree with that. I understand the concept of what you're saying because the way that you carry yourself completely transforms. And so now on a day-to-day real life application, you know, to the person that's spending their whole day crunching numbers in an Excel spreadsheet, and they're getting bogged down by their boss. I need this by this time. They need this report. To the stay-at-home mom that literally is just cleaning up spit up all over themselves and literally is running on 2 hours of sleep, you know, to anybody, right? How do you find the beauty in, let's say a teacher, for example, right? Love what you do. Of course, you ask any teacher, like, why did you become a teacher? Well, I want to shape the next generation of people. I want to be, they want to literally be influential. They want to teach the next generation. It's a selfless job, but the day to day where you're literally just tracking kids down all day and there's stuff everywhere and you don't have time to think about yourself. How do you, is it create more time to yourself to continue to reinforce and remind yourself why you're doing what you're doing? Is that the best way to love what you do? How do you, because I agree, loving what you do is so important, whether it's actually my job and my responsibilities, but
Well, it's first of all, we could, you're right. We could spend hours and hours and hours on this one subject because naturally we're all going to have ebbs and flows in our daily lives. I mean, motivation goes up and goes down and goes up and goes down. Um, you know, a famous person once said, some people are motivated and have enthusiasm for 30 minutes, others for 30 days, but it's the person who stays motivated and enthusiastic for 30 years
I'm
that
30
makes
minutes.
this that makes the success of their life. So, we're all going to go through the ups and downs, but it comes down to a couple things. It comes down to always remembering the why, right? Because that why is what sustains you through the boring, I'm putting data on spreadsheet, moments, right? That can seem pretty mundane, but there's a reason for it. And if you believe in that why and believe in the mission, but there's another element too. And here's the one question I probably got in 35 years and over. I've literally I lost count, but I've literally spoken to well over 500,000 salespeople in my career, over 2 million people total, but over 500,000 salespeople. And here is the one question that I got probably more than any other question in 35 years. David, I hear you. I agree with everything you said, but how do I keep my team motivated? Right? That was probably the question I got more than any other question. Because if they're not motivated, none of those things, none of those skills and things that you taught are going to matter. Right? So how do I keep them motivated? And I used to give very long. I thought about it, and it was a multi-layered answers, and then I boiled it down to one thing, because they wanted that sound bite. They wanted the quick thing that they could go back and implement immediately to keep them. And here it is. And you're going to love this because you're in this field. Learning. When you stop learning, you stop growing. And that's when you start getting unmotivated. That's when the look in your eye changes. That's when the tone of your voice changes, right? That's when the way you carry yourself in the hallway changes. Learning and motivation are tied together on the same pulley. The more you learn, the more you're going to become motivated. When you stop learning, it's going to be it's only a matter of time before motivation starts dragging down. So I would tell people this: your job as a leader, your job as a manager, your job as as a company owner, you have one job, and that's to grow your people. Okay, learning. If everybody went to work every day with the job of, I'm going to learn one new thing today, they're going to be more influential. And you know what? The Department of Learning, when times get tight, companies should double and triple down on learning, because that's where the rubber meets the road. That if you want people, you're putting more on people, more responsibilities, not necessarily more pay. You're not going to do it very successfully if you're not motivating them, and you're not growing them, and you're not teaching them. So you know what? Learning plays a huge role in influence.
Yeah, that's the challenges, I think, in modern organizations or anything is we just get so consumed by the day to day, and that we believe that learning has a time and place. But learning is a thing that, again, also just exists as we operate. So from a leader's perspective, for example, they view a behavior that is not progressing performance or the business forward, and they then take time to notate that physically or mentally, pull the team member aside and say, hey, we need to spend more time working on this. This is something that I noticed, as opposed to like on the job coaching or calling it out in the moment, or putting team members in a position that where they feel comfortable failing. But the moral of the story is people feel like, oh, now I got to go learn, as opposed to you learn as you do, you learn as you fail.
Yeah, learning is not an event.
Right. That's
I
what
mean,
I mean.
it can be an event,
Right.
right? But I always said it this way: learning is not like a button. Okay, now we're going to go learn, and we button the button. Learning is more like a zipper, right? You're learning slowly, and all the pieces kind of interweave and interlock, and it's day to day, and it's never ending. it's constant, it's perpetual. And the reason we spend so much time talking about this today is because it plays such a pivotal role in influence. If you're unmotivated and you don't believe in what you're doing, and you're not going to be very influential, right? It's the parent who lectures the child on what not to do, right? And then turns around and does the opposite, right? That's an extreme example, but it's a perfect one in saying that learning has to be an authentic. You have to believe it. For you to make an impact, it has to be something that you don't just say, you don't just decree, you actually model. Um,
Right. Yeah. It kind of going back into, you know, influence and, whether you believe it or not, we all have influence, and, it's more powerful and impactful, through ordinary moments and through the way that you carry yourself and the way that you sound when you say things, when you look, when you do things, even more than the message that you have for someone else or your team. That's where influence really exists. The reason I believe that study by the Albert Morabian exists is because that is what is reaching people's emotions quicker. When you say things a certain way and when you look a certain way, that hits their emotions in a way, because words are just words. Without the why, they mean nothing. Um, but again, kind of going back to, a thing that I've thought so much about. Again, this flip side of the coin of influence can have a negative effect, or a positive. And the reason why it might have a negative effect is because intentionally or unintentionally, negative influence is a result of thinking, or having a mentality of what's in it for me. I need a team member to do this so my boss can get off my ass about being behind on, our performance quota for the month. Whether you say that out loud or even think it, that is the truth. And I think it's natural to think that way and feel that way, because this is something I've been thinking so much about. Every single person is literally the main character of their life. I mean,
oh,
yes, we have friends and family and anybody else that's important to us, and they mean the world to us. But at the end of the day, everybody truly believes I'm the main character. And so I don't diss people for thinking or feeling that way of like, what's in it for me? Because it's a very natural human thing to do. But that's the moment where bad influence, I'm going to use the word bad influence, for lack of a better word, but that's where it slips through the cracks.
yeah. Well,
Because you have this natural human instinct of, I'm doing everything I do and saying things because it's about me.
yeah. No, you're right. And look, you're right. Influence is a power that can be used positively or negatively. I mean, there's plenty. History is full of people who was very influential, but in a very negative way, right? So yes, influence is a power that comes with responsibility, and you've got to use it for good and use it. And that's why taking what you said and taking the what's in it for me, translating it to how can this help you? How can this better the other person? The one I've often used the formula for influence, if because I've often been asked, what's the formula for influence? Well, that's a tough one. But I've often said my answer has always been authenticity plus conviction, right? Authenticity plus conviction equals influence. Now, again, that could be positive or negative, but authenticness, meaning you're truly authentic, right? You're not putting on an act. You're not, you're believable. Your eyes and your tone of your voice and everything is screaming authenticity. Again, good or bad. Plus conviction means that you've internalized it, you believe it. Um, so authenticity plus conviction is influence. And it can be, you're right, it can be good or bad.
Maybe a more uplifting example as someone that's an avid nerd and Marvel fan, but that's what Uncle Ben said. With great power comes great responsibility. He said
Yeah.
that to Spider-Man. You probably don't know this. But yes, for leaders and people out there that are in a position of power, and when we say power, we mean, yes, obviously in the working place, you have direct reports. From someone in the household, when you have children, you are automatically and naturally put into a position of power. You're expected to influence, but we've hopefully made it clear that every single person has the power of influence, whether you believe it or not. If you ask me, this is something that, again, there is an element that I'm probably naive to. Let's, for example, talk about it from a selling perspective. There is necessary things that you have to do to be aggressive, to stand your ground. There's certain tactics, there's strategies in a selling environment. It is a game, not necessarily, but there is aspects of, strategic, actions that you can take to further progress the sale. But I truly believe if you want to have more influence over the person that you're connecting with, if the one question you ask yourself before that interaction, this is my belief, could be right or wrong, is how can I leave this conversation making this person feel better, having this person, be more, you know, maybe happy is not the right word if you understand what I'm saying. Like, how can I just leave this person or this interaction and this person leave feeling better and being a better person than they were before the interaction started? And everything else falls into place.
Yeah, that's very wise. And I'm going to put it another way. If you seek to connect first, selling will become, it will be secondary, will be more natural. In other words, build a relationship, right? Sure, your job as a salesperson, you feed your family based on your productivity. I get it. But you can't go out on every single sales call and make a sale. You can't get out of your car or pick up the phone and say, I'm going to make a sale. But you can get out of your car, pick up the phone, and you can further the relationship, right? That you can do. And that is the building blocks of influence. If you just take every interaction and just continue to build a relationship, then the pieces will start to fall into place. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't skills and tactics and things you can learn along the way to be more effective. Absolutely. But seek first to connect.